is Nathan Quinn, and welcome back. I'm glad to see y'all. This is episode number 2. Really, this is just going to be my background from, when I started generally in high school all the way up until the point where I first started experiencing my cognitive injuries, which didn't really happen until my 30s. Want to preface this video again by saying I'm not a medical provider. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a patient, and this is just me sharing my experience and my stories in the hopes that it helps change the narrative, provides a positive option to the very frequent negative option narrative stories that we hear surrounding cognitive health or mental health or behavioral health, and to help kind of reduce the shame and the stigma in that space, right? So, though I didn't really experience my diagnosed depression until my 30s, I had what I would describe as an appropriate amount of anxiety and probably some depression as a teenager, right? Teenagers are anxious. The world's ending. Nothing is as important as it ever will be right now, and parents just don't understand. So I grew up in a military family. Both my parents were in the Navy, so I had to move around a lot. And because of that, I might have already been an extrovert, but having to move around every 2 to 3 years definitely reinforced and solidified that as a personality type for me. Just by the nature of having to start a new school every couple years, right? I became very adept at making friends, making small talk, getting to know people. It became very natural to me, and it became comfortable. I liked engaging with people. I liked talking to people. And that really shaped who I was. I got to live around the world, got to live around the country, got to see things that a lot of kids my own age hadn't seen and maybe never would see even into adulthood. But I decided at a certain point that I didn't want to go to 2 high schools. So I made a decision to go to a single high school, but that decision came at the cost of me having to move in with my grandparents, my mother's parents. So I was kind of forced at an early age to move out of the house at an early age. I likened it to moving off to college without moving off to college. Now, unfortunately for teenage me, my mother had 3 brothers. So I had 3 uncles on my mom's side, which meant I was in effect the 5th teenager to go through that house, which meant I couldn't get through or get away with anything, much to my chagrin, but paid off in the long run, probably for the best. In high school, I placed some really high demands on myself. I played football for all 4 years. We ended up winning state our senior year. I did wrestling for a year. I participated in the school's theater program for about 2 years, and I even did the Boy Scouts and actually ended up earning my Eagle Scout. All that to say, I tried to remain well-rounded and expose myself to a lot of different things, a lot of different experiences. But I placed a lot of high experiences on myself, and ultimately I ended up earning a 4-year full scholarship through the Navy, through the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps, or NROTC, as a Marine Option Midshipman. So that meant that if I made it through the program and I graduated college and I earned a commission, I would earn a commission in the Marine Corps, because the Marines are part of the Navy. Just don't tell the Marines that. They will say the men's department. So be it. But given my naval background, to me, that was the obvious choice, right? I want to go into the Navy, but I didn't want to be on a boat or on a sub, and the Marines had more options aligned with what I wanted to do, either aviation or something on the ground, whether armor, infantry, whatever have you. So got to college, and my priorities in college were basically aligned with that of Van Wilder. All right, for lack of a better term, my expectations of what it was to be a college student, and really even a high school student, were shaped largely by the American Pie series. Talking about the first 2. The rest of them, okay. But that was my expectation, right? And that's all I wanted to do. When I was in college, I just wanted to party and have a good time and get drunk and hook up with chicks, because that's what I thought you were supposed to do at college. And honestly, that's what I thought I was supposed to do in high school. Not for lack of trying. I didn't do a whole lot of that in high school, mostly because my grandparents were wise to my shenanigans. So I was trying to make up for it when I got to college. And to me, the ROTC thing was just an extracurricular, something that I would do on the side, and eventually it would give me a job. Great. Um, so up until that point, I hadn't really been challenged. I hadn't really faced any serious adversity until my sophomore year of college. And that first weekend, I got in trouble with the RAs. We had beer in our fridge. We were under the age of 21. We were having a little party in our dorm room, and I ended up losing my scholarship. I lost my scholarship completely. Was kicked out of the program. We had a brand new commander of the Navy unit, and he was trying to set a precedence of zero tolerance for alcohol-related incidents because up to that point there had been a lot of alcohol-related incidents, and so he was trying to put a stop to it. Where I went to school, Miami University, big party school, so he was trying to change the culture. So this forced me to reevaluate my priorities. I had to do a lot of soul searching on some very long, lonely runs, either late at night or early in the morning by myself, because by that time I had already done ROTC for a year. So I was used to waking up early in the morning and going to work out. So I just kept doing it because it was what was familiar to me, and it was somewhat cathartic. Um, so a couple weeks went by, talked to my girlfriend, my then girlfriend, now wife, and I decided that I still wanted to serve in the military in some capacity. And based off what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, things that interested me, the Army was the obvious choice because it was between the Army and the Air Force. And so I determined that eventually I wanted to get to either the 75th Ranger Regiment or the Special Forces, the Green Berets. And so I began to backwards plan and figure out, okay, does Miami have an Army program? Kind of, sort of. There was a detachment that answered to Xavier University. So I went and found that colonel, that lieutenant colonel, that '05, and I said, hey, sir, I laid everything out for him, fell on my sword. I said, I screwed up. These are the mistakes that I made. And, I want to fix this, but I still want to serve. And so he told me that, all right, you have to prove that you're in it for the right reasons and not just in it for the money. So you have to enlist and go through basic training. So I did. Enlisted in February 2010 as an 88 Mike, and then I went to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, graduating in August of 2010. It's one of the last classes to go through Fort Knox, oddly enough, before it became full-time cadet command. And so then I contracted as a simultaneous membership program cadet, so that meant I was in the Ohio National Guard, but also in ROTC at the same time, in that if I successfully completed ROTC, I would earn a commission as an officer. So this is important because it was at this point, this reflection, where I made the Army my personality. That became my sole focus, right? Or that became my identity. And that is going to come back to cause issues 10 years later ish. So I decided that, okay, in order to get into either the Ranger Regiment or Special Forces, I probably need to be in the combat arms. There's no aviators in the Ranger Regiment, so that kind of ruled that one out. Also, once with Marine ROTC, I tried flying a simulated helicopter, and I discovered I was absolutely terrible at flying rotary wing platforms, so I decided that was God telling me to stay away from the sky, so I did. So I ruled that out. So then I said, okay, infantry. Infantry makes the most sense. If I know I want to go this direction, infantry makes the most sense. And infantry is what appealed to me, right? When I thought of the Army, I thought of Band of Brothers. I thought we were soldiers. I was thinking infantry. Jump out of airplanes, shoot guns. To me, that's what came to mind. So the infantry was the obvious choice. So I said, all right, in order to be most competitive to get an infantry slot, I need to get my GPA up, which, to the surprise of probably nobody after partying my way through my freshman year of college, wasn't stellar. So my entire junior year, I didn't go out a single time, except for the time I turned 31 that one weekend. But I remember distinctly spending damn near every weekend in the library with my girlfriend studying. And again, that illustrated that getting to the Army and getting to Special Forces into Ranger Regiment became a singular focus. Almost everything else was secondary. And the everything else being my girlfriend, right? with the exception of her, nothing else really was a priority. It was get your grades up to where they need to be so you can commission as an infantry officer on active duty. Commission as an infantry officer on active duty, okay, get to a light infantry unit because you probably need to deploy and get experience leading troops in combat. All right, so then we probably need to network into either the 101st Airborne Division, the 82nd Airborne Division, 10th Mountain Division, or the 173rd. So essentially anywhere within the 18th Airborne Corps. So I did, networked my way into the 101st down at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I said, okay, I probably need to have a Ranger tab. So I was like, all right, I gotta go get my Ranger tab. So I went, when I commissioned, managed to commission as an infantry officer. My stick-to-itiveness to my scholarly activities paid off. Got an active duty commission as an infantry officer in August of 2012. But I didn't get a training date for my infantry basic officer leaders course down at Fort Benning, Georgia until April of 2013. So I had about 8 or 9 months to kill. So I decided, well, I've got a lot of time to kill and I have some GI Bill left over from my parents. I'll get my master's degree. Why not? I figured having a master's degree would make me very competitive applying to either Ranger Regiment or Special Forces. So I started working on my master's degree, probably got about halfway through before I started BOLIC, Basic Officer Leaders Course. So BOLIC was just a 16-week long course where infantry officers learn how to be rifle platoon leaders, essentially, the ins and outs of leading a rifle platoon. Did that for 16 weeks. Then I went to the U.S. Army Ranger School, also at Fort Benning, where I just basically got punched in the face for 63 days. I got lucky. I was a non-recycle. I went straight through. I had a phenomenal squad, a phenomenal platoon. So that was all luck. After that, I went to Airborne School in November of 2013. Jumped out of airplanes for 3 weeks in the cold. And then in January of 2014, I went to the Reconnaissance and Surveillance Leaders course for about a month. All these are at Fort Benning. And then I moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I joined 3rd Battalion, 187th Infantry Regiment, the Iron Rock Sons, 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 101st. So I deliberately tried to work my way into that unit because I knew they were slated to deploy soon, and they had a very high op tempo. So they were a unit that had a lot of deployments during the Global War on Terror. They had developed a very good reputation as far as their effectiveness. And so I said, all right, if I have an opportunity to get there, that's a good place to be to try to get to Special Forces. That said, I kept my ambitions to go SF to myself. My focus became, hey, be good at my job. For anybody watching this that wants to go Special Forces, the singular best advice I ever got from my uncle, who was a Special Forces NCO, when I questioned him as far as what advice he had for an aspiring Special Forces officer, was focus on the 25-meter target. So knowing cardinally where I wanted to go, that I wanted to get to SF or Ranger Regiment, was great. But if I focused on that the whole time, I wouldn't probably perform well at what I was doing currently. And those two organizations only take the best candidates. And so if you don't perform well, they're not going to take you. So do well at your current job, and everything else will work itself out. All right. So got to the Rock Sons in February 2014, got to a rifle platoon a few months later, and then deployed with that platoon in October 2014 to Afghanistan. I had a phenomenal platoon. I had phenomenal NCOs, great soldiers. They made my job super easy, helped me not get fired, and I appreciated everything they did. So we were there for 9 months, came back home. Then I got to go serve as the battalion mortar platoon leader. Did that for about a year, during which I got to go to the infantry mortar leaders course back down at Fort Benning. So I went to Fort Benning for 4 more weeks of training, and then came back to Fort Campbell. Served with the battalion mortar platoon. Around that time, November 2015, was when I finished my master's degree. And shortly thereafter was when I made known my desire to go to Special Forces. I chose Special Forces over Ranger Regiment, mostly because I felt I missed the window to apply to Ranger Regiment, and my research had led me to incorrectly believe that you couldn't do both. For the officer timeline, you couldn't do both Ranger Regiment and SF. It just was too tight of a squeeze to fit in through your timeline. That was later deemed incorrect. There were plenty of guys in my Q course class who had come from Ranger Regiment who were officers, so you could do both if you wanted to. Just don't tell Ranger Regiment. They don't like SF guys. So I told everybody that I wanted to go SF. Or I told the relevant people, or I told my battalion commander, my battalion, so hey, I intend to drop a packet to Special Forces. And they were supportive. They said, okay, hey, got it. We think you'll do great. Only problem is your selection date is February of 2017. We're supposed to deploy in October. So what are we going to do? And so the battalion XO came to me and said, hey, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. You stay home to train for selection and go to selection, but you have to be the rear detachment battalion commander, meaning you are in charge of all the people that we're not going to deploy for one reason or another, usually not great reasons. You got to herd all these cats in exchange for being allowed to train for selection and going to selection. Keep the place from burning down. I said, okay, I can do that for you. This is important because this is really my first exposure to cognitive health. I was definitely a skeptic up to this point, and this experience did not help. There were a lot of people that we interacted with that were in inpatient treatment for behavioral health, cognitive injuries, where it appeared to me that they were abusing the system to either A, avoid the deployment, or B, try to get out of the Army because they had signed a contract and they realized once they arrived to their first unit that maybe this wasn't a great decision. Either way, a lot of my interactions led me to believe, hey, this person I think might be faking it, maybe. Now, we always have to treat these cases seriously because you never know, truly, and the cost of being wrong with that assessment is too high, right? So you always err on the side of caution and you take care of the soldiers. But I just want to highlight that this experience led me to be a skeptic. And then a few years down the line, my perspective changed. So I did the rear detachment commander thing for a little bit, and then I went to Special Forces Assessment Selection in February, successfully completed it in March of 2017. I then it's also known as SFAS. If you hear me refer to SFAS later on, Special Forces Assessment Selection. It's 3 weeks long. Not going to get into the details about what it consists of. That's part of the mystery of it. But if you want to know bad enough, just do a Google search. You'll find the information out there. It's on the internet. Did that, got selected. Then I moved from Fort Campbell, Kentucky to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I started the Special Operations Forces Captain's Career Course because I had just become a captain. So the Army, whenever somebody gets promoted, be it an officer or a non-commissioned officer or an NCO, they have what's called Professional Military Education, or PME. And so for lieutenants, it's Basic Officer Leaders Course. For captains, it's the Captain's Career Course. For majors, it's ILE. And NCOs have BLC, Basic Leaders Course, Senior Leaders Course, Master Leaders Course, so on and so forth. And the Sergeant Major Academy. I don't know all of them, and I'm not going to go into all of them because that's not the point. The point is that just explaining to those of you who aren't from or familiar with the Army side of the house or the military at all what this is and why this is important. It's a necessary training and education that the Army does to try to help keep its people competitive with the civilian market. So this is where you just learn how to be a captain, right? There was nothing soft special operations about it other than the students who comprised it were all candidates for either civil affairs, PSYOPs, or special forces. But we did the same thing that they do at the maneuver captain's career course, namely how to be a maneuver company commander, be it an infantry company commander, armor company commander, striker company commander, mechanized infantry company commander, whatever the case may be. How do you, as a company commander responsible for a fighting organization, plan and fight? It's also where you were first exposed to the military decision-making process, or MDMP. Not even remotely going to get into that because it's not relevant other than making your head want to explode. But did that for a couple months. Then I started the actual Special Forces Q course, qualification course, or just the Q course, or the Q, in fall of 2017. and then went through small unit tactics training, went through survival, evasion training, went through my 18 Alpha training where I learned how to do my job as a Special Forces captain, and then I went to Robin Sage, which is the culmination exercise training, where you learn you get evaluated on everybody and you get put on a student operational detachment alpha or an ODA. This is the smallest unit of Green Berets, and this is typically often how we deploy. So a ODA or detachment consists of an officer who's the commander, the warrant officer who's the XO or the executive officer who's the second in command. Then you have your operations officer, or the Zulu or the team sergeant. He's the senior non-commissioned officer. That guy runs the team. Then you have your assistant operations officer, also sometimes referred to as your Fox or your intelligence officer. Then you have 2 weapons sergeants, Bravos, 2 engineer sergeants, Charlies, medical sergeants, Deltas, communication sergeants, Echoes. And you have 2 of them because the theory is you could split the team in half and go 2 6-person teams. So your captain and your warrant would separate, your team sergeant and your assistant operations sergeant would separate, and then you would have a Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo on each organization. So we got to perform as a student variation of that organization and then placed in a realistic training environment where, okay, hey, here's a bunch of problems. How are you going to solve them as Green Berets, as an ODA? So you do that for, oh goodness gracious, like 2 weeks or so, and then you graduate, and hopefully you earn your Green Beret. And then you go through 6 months of language school. My language was French. So I graduated ultimately from the qualification course in April of 2019, and I reported to 1st Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group about a month later in May. I was assigned to a detachment in June and found myself in Syria later that month. Or maybe I got to the detachment in May and was in Syria in June. Either way, it was a pretty quick turnaround. So I graduated, got to a team, and deployed, all exceedingly rapidly. And then this deployment was where, unbeknownst to me, this is where my journey into depression and anxiety started. And so I'll save a lot of that detail for the next episode. But I hope you all found some value in this, just understanding who I am and where I'm coming from and my perspective, and helping understand what shaped that perspective and why I responded the way I did to certain challenges. So subscribe for some more videos, some more content. Share this with people that you think might get some value out of it. And until next time, I'll see y'all then.